Tom Bower, the legendary royal author, is sharpening his quill for a new edition of his book set to reveal huge secrets inside Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage.
No, I choose people who don't want to be written about on the whole, whose lives are shrouded in mystery, and they want to hide their secrets, and I just love digging away to find out what they don't want us to. Meghan is a consummate survival actress. And you raise this extraordinary beginning of the year when she carved 2025 in the sand. And you know, it's a very, very interesting image that it came out on New Year's Day this year, because the previous weeks had been absolutely turgid and torrid for her. She had been dubbed Duchess Difficult again. There have been allegations of bullying.
Tyrant in high heels.
Meghan herself.
And Meghan herself.
In the months before she met Harry, was setting up paparazzi pictures in London. She now acts as if the paparazzi are literally the devil incarnate.
She begged the paparazzi to photograph her, and they wouldn't. And when they did, she says, "Oh, I don't want to, I'm hurt." And that ridiculous story about how they first met, the whole thing was a tissue of inaccuracies, to be polite.
Because what do you make of that? Because as you know, Harry was always very insistent.
Tom, do you think Harry and Meghan are fast learning what they signed away when they took this Netflix big moolah? And I would say they signed away their credibility and their dignity.
Well, that's our view, but it's not theirs. They need the money, and they need it now more than ever because they've got no other source of income. So I think they're just stuck with the devil now. They're tied to Netflix, they're tied to their book, and all the criticism they're going to take means nothing because that's the only way they can earn their money. But what they need to do is face up to the blackmail that's coming from California and in some way or other undermine Harry's and Meghan's credibility.
2 days before the public even knew Lilibet was born, someone had already secured Lilibet.com. Let that sink in. The Queen hadn't even been told her great-granddaughter's name yet, but the website was quietly locked in and ready for business. That move wasn't random, that was strategy. Tom Bower spent 2 full years digging into moments just like this. He interviewed 80 people, and many of them were too nervous to attach their names to what they shared. That says a lot, and even then, there were chapters he couldn't publish. British privacy laws blocked certain stories from Meghan's past. Stories tied to yacht parties, Soho House connections, and parts of her history that critics say were carefully scrubbed from the public eye. What he did release was explosive, but what he wasn't allowed to print, that's the part that really makes people raise an eyebrow. That Lilibet domain tells a bigger story than people realize.
Very aggressive PR for the Sussexes, got way beyond herself because she really doesn't understand the British royal family or Britain, but understands how to project her clients. And so I think she got it wrong by leaking it or even letting anyone know. And so he became hypersensitive and blamed the media for the crashes of his relationships, never thinking that they could have something to do with himself. So he's a very complicated, depressed, unintelligent man who is seeking a role and has got really nobody on whom he could rely, which is in the end where Meghan stepped in. I mean, a needy man met a woman who could help him with his need.
June 2021, Harry finally calls the Queen. We've named her Lilibet. That wasn't just any name. It was the Queen's deeply personal nickname, the one Prince Philip had used for 70 years. The Queen reportedly wasn't upset about the name itself. It was about how it went down. Harry didn't ask. He announced it. When the BBC reported that Harry hadn't secured the Queen's blessing, the response wasn't a calm clarification. It was legal threats flying everywhere. But think about it. If there was clear permission, wouldn't Buckingham Palace simply confirm it with one clean statement? Done. Drama over. Instead, there were threats, and then complete silence from the palace. BBC stood firm on their reporting. Harry's team never showed proof of permission. Meanwhile, that domain was already purchased and waiting before the family conversation even happened. And here's the real kicker. This doesn't even sound like Harry's style. He spent 30 years inside an institution where branding and commercial moves like that were off limits. He wasn't the one thinking about domain names and business plays. Someone else clearly was. But Meghan had been shaping her personal brand since she was a teenager. The blog, the constant networking, the carefully polished image, this wasn't random. It was planned. She's always moved like someone who sees life as strategy, assets, and opportunities lined up like chess pieces. A royal baby carrying the Queen's private nickname, that's not just sentimental, that's global recognition on a silver platter. Merchandise, branding, media rights, future deals, an entire empire can spin off one powerful name. So when that domain was locked down before the courtesy call to the Queen, critics saw a pattern. Business setup first, family conversation second. That order raised eyebrows for a reason.
It was William and Kate
Yes.
who were going to be the stars, and not Harry and Meghan, and she didn't want to play second fiddle. What Meghan never really understood, probably not even now, is that when she was cheered as a working royal, it wasn't because she was Meghan Markle, it was because she represented British royalty and all the values of the Queen and all the tradition and 1,000 years of history. So people were cheering not just the person, but also the institution. Can't survive without being seen. And that's her great problem. I mean, she's not invited to the great A-list parties, let alone the B-list parties.
Yeah.
I mean, who is she anymore?
Nobody wants to back her brand. Nobody, other than Netflix, and they've of course now departed, actually wants to put their money behind brand Meghan.
A documentary on his mother would be, by him, surrounded by all of these yes people.
It would be totally inaccurate. I mean, from his own book where he says for a long time he thought his mother had just disappeared and now believes she'd been murdered by the paparazzi, which is ridiculous. Last year she was about to promote her Netflix series and didn't want to firstly be seen with Harry and secondly didn't want to go somewhere where she'd appear cheap and give it gratis. And this year she is desperate to be seen. At that moment last year she was about to promote her Netflix series and didn't want to firstly be seen with Harry and secondly didn't want to go somewhere where she'd appear cheap and give it gratis. And this year she is desperate to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's why she turned up. So I think she has a major problem, financially and professionally. And I think that Harry has a problem because he's lost his charity centre Bailey in Africa. He had better up, and all these commercial deals are declining. I think that his reputation is somewhat toxic, and I think Invictus is his only lifeline, and there'll be problems with that too.
I mean, we've seen people leaving Invictus recently. Important, I think that's you mentioned the Disney special. Does the Disney special at all?
She actually monetized the Queen's name, and I find that alone is pretty damning of her. And even the publishers couldn't quite believe some of the things which I discovered. And one of the big things at that time was sensitivity reading. There was a great fear that she would play the race card.
Of course, he knew very well that she was being pimped.
And that's the thing about Meghan. She's a very, very deceitful person. I don't believe she ever intended to stay. She always intended to take the title, take the connections and get back to California. Because in the end, one of Meghan's many deficiencies is she has nothing to say. There's no originality. There's no profundity. In Meghan's mind, she is Diana.
Yes.
I mean, Diana Spencer is Meghan Spencer. And that was all part of her imagination that somehow she could inherit the glow of her dead mother-in-law.
A documentary on his mother would be, by him, surrounded by all of these yes people.
It would be totally inaccurate. I mean, from his own book where he says for a long time he thought his mother had just disappeared and now believes she'd been murdered by the paparazzi, which is ridiculous. I don't think I think, however, that if he did a program about his mother, that would be for money.
Yes.
And I think it would be a shocking act of further disloyalty. What Meghan never really understood, probably not even now, is that when she was cheered as a working royal, it wasn't because she was Meghan Markle, it was because she represented British royalty and all the values of the Queen and all the tradition and 1,000 years of history. So people were cheering not just the person, but also the institution. His mother had amazing status. She looked beautiful. She had terrific poise. She worked very hard at being a royal. She was very empathetic with a lot of sick people, none of the things that Meghan would ever dream of. But I do think the Sussex Overdrive is unbelievable. But I mean, I don't think that he is going to get back in. I mean, I think that there are two reasons. One is I think that William wouldn't allow it. And secondly, the moment he got back to America, he immediately promoted Disney and his trip to Disney World, which showed that he is very commercially minded, which we'll get into later on, which makes it impossible for him. And of course, Meghan wouldn't come back to Britain.
Tom Bower tried to dive even deeper into Meghan's life before Harry. And this is where things get tricky. There have been long-running allegations and rumors about her social circle in her 20s, whispers about exclusive yacht gatherings in the Mediterranean, elite guest lists, and extremely private events. Hollywood chatter often links those circles back to Soho House, a hotspot for powerful connections and quiet deals. One name that keeps coming up is Marcus Anderson, a director at Soho House, and someone widely reported to have been close to Meghan during that time. People say he opened doors for her, rooms filled with influence, money, and opportunity that most aspiring actresses never even see. When 60 Soho House members reportedly showed up at her wedding, that wasn't a small detail. That signals a network that runs deep and loyal. Bower had sources willing to speak about that chapter of her life. But UK privacy laws are strict. You can't publish certain claims without rock-solid proof that would survive a courtroom battle. Even if multiple people tell the same story, it's not enough without documented evidence. So entire sections reportedly got cut. Stories about how she financed her lifestyle before landing that supporting role on a Canadian cable series. Details about the circles she moved in, the parties, the powerful figures in those rooms. Those pages never saw daylight. What Bower does make clear is this. Meghan has shown a pattern of reinvention. She cut ties with her father. She ended her first marriage. She distanced herself from friendships that no longer aligned with her future. The breaks were clean, no looking back. And people who knew her during those earlier years, many are silent, whether by choice or by legal caution. The past didn't just fade away. Critics say it was cleared out to make room for the Duchess storyline.
Well, you know, Piers, you're the first person to say how limited Prince Harry is, unfortunately, and how his wife trades off her husband's fame and fortune, or not so great fortune now. I mean, this is the problem, but we're still interested because, after all, he's a great character in our modern day. A man who she abandoned for months to the media, and now presents her mother, Doria, speaking for the first time, telling outright lies about her ex-husband. I mean, this was a calculated attempt against the family.
So many surprises, by the way, tucked away in your book. Everybody is already buzzing because you reveal that Simon is not a fan of Jennifer Lopez. I was not aware of this. You say he can't stand her. So set the record straight for us, Tom. What's his beef with J-Lo?
Well, he just found her just too vain and too self-interested, which seems like he met his own match. But in the end, Simon doesn't really like many celebrities. I noticed when I went with him to the Oprah Winfrey Show and many other places around Hollywood and elsewhere, he's a rather shy guy. He's always afraid of being associated with people who are bigger than him or who might put him in the shade. But in the end, he's pretty critical of people. He doesn't like Elton John. He doesn't like many of the people who are really famous in the music business. You know, he's critical.
October 2018. Meghan lands in Australia wearing around $300,000 worth of Princess Diana's jewelry. Not a subtle nod, not a quiet tribute. We're talking about Diana's Cartier watch and major statement pieces that instantly triggered headlines. And from that moment on, a pattern started forming. Every high-profile appearance, Nigeria, Colombia, event after event, the messaging was loud and clear. The publicists made sure everyone knew she was wearing Diana's jewelry. It wasn't accidental. It was announced, highlighted, folded into the narrative. The jewelry became part of the brand.
The royal family doesn't lie. The royal family is not there to be like a celebrity interview.
Or a
giving things away.
politician. We expect it from politicians or celebrities, but not the royal family.
Exactly. And that was it. That was the final straw. South Park cartoon, you know, when they on their worldwide privacy tour. And you see this shot where they slice off the head of Meghan's head and look inside and it's empty.
Hollow.
And that is exactly the issue.
Meghan seems like she could be on the Sarah Ferguson path.
You mean downhill?
Downhill is exactly
right.
It's only
going downhill. So I mean, there's an appalling narcissism there, an appalling self-interest. It's self-love.
Your generation remembers the real Diana, Princess of Wales. You saw her hug AIDS patients when fear was everywhere. You watched her walk through active minefields in Angola. You saw her sit with people who were suffering, sometimes with no cameras around. That emotional bond wasn't built in a season. It took over a decade of consistent, hands-on work that felt genuine. According to Tom Bauer, Meghan miscalculated what made Diana so beloved. The visual connection doesn't automatically create the emotional one. Wearing Diana's watch doesn't transfer Diana's legacy. That kind of respect can't be borrowed through accessories. It has to be earned over time. Some critics even say Meghan doesn't just admire Diana. She seems to see herself on the same level within the royal story. And that's where older royal watchers push back hard. They lived through Diana's real journey. They know the difference between organic devotion and a carefully constructed image. The jewelry might sparkle, but it's the work that made Diana iconic. Without that, the pieces can start to look more like costume props than living history. Then came winter 2017 at Sandringham, a shooting weekend that insiders say quietly shifted everything. Harry's longtime friends, guys he'd known since school, reportedly made jokes Meghan didn't appreciate. She confronted them. Tension rose. Some of those friends began calling her the fun police, but what followed hit deeper. Reports suggest Meghan encouraged Harry to distance himself completely from that circle.
Meghan is a consummate survival actress. And you raise this extraordinary beginning of the year when she carved 2025 in the sand. And, you know, it's a very, very interesting image that. It came out on New Year's Day this year because the previous weeks had been absolutely turgid and torrid for her. She had been dubbed Duchess Difficult again. There had been allegations of bullying.
Tyrant in high heels.
It's ludicrous. It's all about her. And this extraordinary interview with Serena Williams, where the first 11 minutes is all about her, and not about this phenomenal tennis
Serena
champion.
Williams.
I mean, so that's why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And who'd want to put herself or himself, and always women. I mean, she does have this strange distrust, I think, of men.
And what would Diana think of Harry attacking William in that way? She'd be appalled by her son's behavior. And that was, again, so nauseating, the way he kept on bringing in Diana. Diana, who appealed to the media all the time, who phoned journalists secretly, who brought Martin Bashir into her office, who cooperated with Andrew Morton, who kept on calling Richard Kay. I mean, this is ridiculous.
William and Kate have been utterly humiliated and insulted. First by Meghan herself in the Oprah Winfrey interview, and now again in Spare. These inventions that the Montecito hucksters have delivered about the Prince and Princess of Wales is absurd. His invented allegations about Kate and William not treating the couple properly.
All his denials in the BBC interview in 2019 were proven to be lies. Mm-hmm. And that was the point. And I mean, the photograph is conclusive.
This is the sadness of the stupidity of Prince Harry. He doesn't understand the terrible consequences of many of his allegations and accusations and, unfortunately, misrepresentations and lies in his book. Instead of seeing that surrender is the worst policy to pursue, has made it clear to his close friends
that he'd prefer to find some sort of reconciliation and settlement with Harry and Meghan. And that, of course, in my view, would spell doom and disaster for the monarchy.
Professionally, they've gone down dramatically, and I predicted it in the book, but even I would not have thought it'd be that accelerated. I think personally, I think they've separated their professional lives, but I think what's really a great problem for them now, as of in the last few weeks, is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
Right.
The Netflix series is over. There's no great podcast. They don't generate any money. And I don't see where she is going from here.
And Harry is able, in my view, to really damage Charles by releasing more information or inventions and lies.
William wouldn't allow it. And secondly, the moment he got back to America, he immediately promoted Disney and his trip to Disney World, which showed that he is very commercially minded, which we'll get into later on, which makes it impossible for him. She's fired her biggest shots, the best shots, and they're duds. And Harry has nothing to sell either. In fact, he hates selling. I think there were various things about her sexual life, which I dropped out on the grounds of privacy laws in Britain.
It's hard to see how Harry is going to escape the dangers that he's created himself.
The dim-witted Duke is in diplomatic hot water with the despotic regime of Iran using his Taliban kill count revelation to help justify the execution of a detained British Iranian. King could be treading a dangerous path because Harry and Meghan will settle for nothing less than total capitulation and victory.
The Montecito couple will certainly not accept just a simple apology. They'll want something that's actually grovelling, absolute capitulation.
Meghan is a consummate survival actress. And you raised this extraordinary beginning of the year when she carved 2025 in the sand. And you know, it's a very, very interesting image that it came out on New Year's Day this year, because the previous weeks had been absolutely turgid and torrid for her. She had been dubbed Duchess Difficult again. There have been allegations of bullying.
Tyrant in high heels.
Instead of seeing that surrender is the worst policy to pursue, has made it clear to his close friends that he'd prefer to find some sort of reconciliation and settlement with Harry and Meghan. And that, of course, in my view, would spell doom and disaster for the monarchy. Their whole financial future is tied up in publishing more revelations, accusations, and all the rest. You can't trust Meghan and Harry. That's the point. Even if you think you've got a deal, and that I don't believe that is possible, but if you think you have, the palace will be shocked that they will renege immediately because they have no advantage of reconciliation. They've got no advantage of ending their vendetta.
Not a slow drift, a clean break. When the wedding arrived, several of those longtime friends weren't at the private evening reception. Harry's inner circle missing from the most intimate part of his big day. That sends a message. Many people recognize this pattern. When someone new enters your life and one by one the old connections disappear, that's not always about protection. Sometimes it looks more like isolation. Fast forward to California. Harry is far from London, far from the friends he grew up with, no familiar support system around him. Just Meghan and a smaller, tightly controlled circle. Bauer notes something striking. This pattern of clean breaks wasn't new. Meghan had already cut ties with her father. Her first marriage ended decisively when that chapter closed. Friendships from earlier phases of her life reportedly faded when they no longer aligned with her path. To critics, it looks consistent. When something stops fitting the vision, it gets left behind. No hesitation, no rewind. Critics say the pattern was there long before Harry ever showed up. They argue she knows how to isolate, how to tighten the circle, how to remove anyone who might question the storyline. Step by step, old voices disappear. Harry just became the biggest example of it. March 2021, the Oprah interview. Over 50 million people watching worldwide. Tom Bauer went through that broadcast line by line. He claims he found 17 separate statements that don't stand up when checked against public records and timelines. That's not small stuff. Take the secret backyard wedding story. Meghan told Oprah Winfrey that she and Harry were married 3 days before the public ceremony, just the two of them and the Archbishop in their garden. A private, romantic exchange of vows. Sounds powerful. But later, the Archbishop clarified that no legal wedding happened before the ceremony. What took place was a rehearsal. The official marriage was at St. George's Chapel. Period. That detail matters because Meghan's version reshaped how people saw the royal wedding. It made the grand ceremony feel like theater, like the real love story had already happened in secret. Except the legal record says otherwise. Then came the way she described conversations about Archie, the way timing was framed, the way certain discussions were linked together. Bauer argues the timeline doesn't line up with documented events. He claims those conversations weren't connected in the way the interview suggested, and that's just 2 examples. He says there were 15 more inconsistencies layered throughout the special. Why does that hit so hard? Because 50 million people formed opinions that night. The interview reshaped global perception of the royal family. Viewers walked away with intense emotions, especially around claims of troubling conversations and how Meghan said she was treated. If major parts of the story don't align with verifiable facts, critics argue that's not just fuzzy memory. That looks like narrative control. Bauer's position is blunt. He believes Meghan crafted a powerful victim storyline that doesn't fully match documented timelines, and once that narrative went global, it stuck. Then there's the fashion world clash. Edward Enninful, former editor of British Vogue, reportedly had a cover concept locked in. Meghan wanted involvement. Reports say she tried to influence direction and placement. Enninful's answer? No.
But I do think that when you're mocked so publicly as they've been, their value begins to nosedive pretty quickly. And I don't think they're finding any more sources of income.
The monarchy of Britain is not there to be a target for people who want to make money and gain publicity from attacking them. Meghan was warmly welcomed in Britain, that everyone in the royal family tried their very, very hardest to make her feel at home and accommodate her, but that unfortunately Meghan only wanted to be the star and made it impossible for her and the royal family to collaborate.
And for Harry, who absolutely knew his family are not racist, to say nothing. And you could actually see he was uncomfortable with the accusations being made by his wife, and yet he chose to say nothing for months, if not a year, during which the family were raked over the coals for being racist. I think that was absolutely unforgivable.
Professionally, they've gone down dramatically, and I predicted it in the book, but even I would not have thought it'd be that accelerated. I think personally, they've separated their professional lives, but I think what's really a great problem for them now, as of in the last few weeks, is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished. They don't generate any money, and I don't see where she is going from here.
When that didn't work, she allegedly pushed to shape online content. That was shut down too. The relationship reportedly cooled fast. Journalist Sam Kashner later described his professional experience with 4 sharp words: manipulated, betrayed, played, orchestrated. Heavy language coming from a seasoned reporter. Even during her British Vogue guest edit, what should have been collaboration reportedly turned tense. Staff members felt she acted less like a guest and more like she was running the publication. On the surface, smiles. Behind the scenes, frustration boiling quietly. After it was all done, Edward Enninful reportedly said, "I feel like I've done it and wouldn't necessarily repeat myself." That's industry language for one thing, never again. For someone who works with major celebrities every day to even hint he wouldn't collaborate again, that speaks volumes. Insiders frame it as total control or nothing at all. And when control slips, relationships crack, bridges burned. And it's not just fashion insiders. Some A-list names in Hollywood have reportedly gone quiet on Meghan and Harry, not because of scandal headlines, but strategy. These are global players. They maintain relationships with the royal family that matter for business, charity, diplomacy, and long-term influence. Being publicly aligned too closely with a couple seen as clashing with the palace can create awkward optics, and in elite circles, optics are currency. Access to state events, charity patronages, international connections, those elevate brands. You don't gamble that lightly, especially not for two people now based in Montecito. Last year, Meghan skipped Kevin Costner's charity event while promoting a Netflix project. This year, she showed up. Critics say that shift reflects changing leverage. Tom Bauer sees it as urgency. The Netflix output struggled to dominate the way many predicted. The Spotify partnership collapsed publicly. The Hollywood doors that were expected to swing wide, a lot of them barely cracked. The royal title was meant to be the ultimate power asset. Instead, some argue it's complicated, admired in some spaces, controversial in others. That tension follows them everywhere. Then there are the chapters Bauer couldn't include in Revenge. He's hinted that certain details from Meghan's earlier life would have sparked an uproar if printed. But UK privacy law isn't a game. Publish unproven claims and you face serious legal consequences. So everything that made it into his book cleared legal review. Every timeline sourced, every claim vetted. Still, Bauer has suggested there's far more material sitting in research files. Accounts from individuals who spoke off the record. Stories about her pre-Harry world that legally can't be aired. Allegations about yacht circles. The Soho House network. The lifestyle before landing that cable TV role. He had sources, but without documentation strong enough for court, those pages stayed locked away. Critics point to what they call a widening gap between the polished public narrative and what investigators claim they uncovered. Domain names secured early, old friendships cut clean, 17 disputed claims in a single televised interview, professional alliances strained, Hollywood stepping back. They see a pattern, calculated moves presented as organic truth. Some observers go further. They argue it reflects someone who plans carefully, who reshapes moments to generate sympathy, who narrows their partner's world until outside voices fade. That's the portrait critics paint. And now Bauer is preparing a follow-up, a second wave. He's indicated that what couldn't be included before may finally surface in expanded form. If that happens, the next chapter could hit even harder.